All right, we are live on YouTube and we are live on Zoom.
Welcome everybody who's starting to arrive. Please introduce yourself in the chat, and when you do, make sure your setting is to all panelists and attendees. We'll be starting promptly at 9:30. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for introducing yourself in the chat as you arrive and making sure that your setting is to all panelists and attendees. We have a great session coming up and we'll start at 9:30.
See Sabrina. So cute.
Okay, everybody, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's 9:30. And welcome, happy Friday. I am Stephanie Eichley Chang, and I work here in the College of Education at San Jose State. And I will be hosting the webinar today. And we also have Brian Chung-Dooley on the side here helping us out. And he is our technology communication coordinator here for the college, and he is amazing. We are super excited to introduce to you today Lisa Delapo, and she is the Director of Information and Instructional Technology for Union School District, a local district here in San Jose. And she has a great session planned for you: explore, explain, apply, and distance learning. And we're super excited. Wait till you see everything she'll be talking about today. Before we get started and I hand it over, I'd like to go over a few announcements. First of all, this session is being recorded and it'll be available afterward for you at our website where you registered, and also Brian will send this out. Captions are available in the recording and they're available at the bit.ly address, which Brian will put in the chat. Just to remind you, if you haven't attended with us yet this week, your video and audio are automatically turned off and will stay off the whole time because this is a highly attended session. And so if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A and I will be monitoring that. And I'm also monitoring the chat. And then Lisa will stop, along the way to take a few questions as needed. And we'll hand it over from here, Lisa. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, thank you. And Stephanie, feel free to just stop me if you find like there's a really good question or something that is, there's general misunderstanding in the chat. So
okay,
I'm totally open to that. All right, I'm gonna start sharing my screen. All right. Oh, since they already introduced me, please also you can contact me on Twitter at Lisa Teaches Tech. And also you can find me working with Q a lot. I'm their incoming vice president, and Brian Briggs, who also presented for you all, is going to be the president. So that's really exciting. So explore, explain, apply. The one thing that I wanted to start off with is this is very deeply research-based. I learned about it through Ramsey Musalem, who has done a TED Talk. He's also come to the area. He's from the Bay Area. He's actually in Sonoma, and he has his doctorate through USF. And he did a TED Talk about sparking curiosity, and he wrote a book called Spark Learning, and I highly recommend it. But his blog is what goes into this in practice, because he still teaches. He teaches high school physics, I believe, and chemistry. And so he's just amazing. And what he does is he really engages the audience. And so many of these things, if you've seen him present, you've probably seen part of my presentation, because I just basically borrowed it from him. And we also worked with him this summer, this last semester, just having him teach teachers the idea of the cycles of learning and deeply engaging students through the explore, explain, apply model. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but when you get access to my slide deck, you can click on these and they'll take you to all of the different resources that these are based on. But again, very research embedded, and just really, I find the reason I like it so much is because I still remember the first time I saw it done and what I learned. So it's a way to keep that FOMO, that you don't want to miss anything when you're learning, and it keeps the students from wanting to just, go. You're competing against a PlayStation or an Xbox. You're competing against sleep. I know my kids are still asleep actually in their bedrooms right now. So this will get them to come to the classroom, and it can be asynchronous and synchronous at different pieces. So instead of explaining exactly what it looks like first, I'm going to actually have you be in an activity. And Stephanie will have to keep me informed on what this looks like in the chat room, but I'm going to show you a little bit of the clip, okay? And then after the clip, you're going to go to the URL, which is bit.ly/sjsuexp, and you're going to fill out the form there, okay? So I'm going to play this clip. All right, so you saw Harrison Ford, also known as Indiana Jones, think that he was replacing the statue with some sand, and it didn't work. So what went wrong? And in that form, when you go to, whoops, let me go back, sorry. Let me move this, sorry. When you go to bit.ly/sjsu EXP, it's basically San Jose State University Explorer, you should fill out a form there that looks like.
Hey, Lisa.
Lisa.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, some people are saying that they can't access the form. They need permission.
That's terrible. Mistake number one that Lisa made. All right, let's go to live form, and I will change the settings here. Yep, there we go. Now you should be able to get it. Sorry about that. So we'll just watch here, all of the responses come in. You may have to refresh your screen. And I'll just give it a minute. He was blinded by greed. All right, so I'm just going to stop right here and just take this. And I'm going to go back to my thing here and go to this word cloud. Oops. So a lot of you came up with assumption, weight, sand, bag, idle. And so this really shows that a lot of you feel like weight had something to do with what went wrong. So that explore basically engaged you into thinking more about what went wrong. But now I'm going to show you my lecture piece, which is a mini lesson that you would do to explain. So let me go to my next slide. And this is actually Ramsey Masalam presenting in EduCreations, his video on density. And it's not playing.
All right, guys, so we watched this demonstration, right? And the mistake Indiana made, which most of you guys figured out, is Indiana thought that all things that have the same volume have the same weight. We know that's not true, because if I dropped a balloon on my foot, it would not hurt. But if I dropped a bowling ball on my foot, it would hurt, right? Same space, different mass. So you think a guy with a PhD in archaeology would be able to figure this out. But the equation brings those two variables together, and it's called density, and we're going to use D to represent density. But a lot of times people don't like density because there's a numerator and a denominator. And a lot of times people say density breaks my heart. And if you guys look closely, the broken heart is the same thing as an M over a V. So we have this equation, density equals mass over volume. When we come into class, you guys are going to be solving for mass, and you're going to be solving for volume, and you're going to be solving for density, and we're going to do some application problems around that. Remember, density breaks your heart.
So yeah, I will never forget when Ramsey taught me that density breaks my heart, because I will never forget it's mass over volume. So thinking about that, what do you need to know now? And you can say this in chat. What do you need to know now about what went wrong in that video? Oops. Let me look at the chat. The density of the idle, the density of each object, yes. So you're going to have to make some assumptions that that statue is fully solid and that the sand is completely dry. And so you're going to need to know how much one molecule of sand is and how much one molecule of gold is. And then you're going to have to do some math, right? You're going to have to figure out how much bigger that sand, that bag of sand, needed to be in order to be accurate. So it could be chocolate inside, but we're assuming that it's not chocolate. And he could have added water. That's I've never seen that answer before. So do you see how this is already engaging the audience and getting them to talk about science without really having to have this big lecture and this big experiment? We just engaged by that video, and now we did the little explain. Now we're going to do apply. Yeah, he probably would have noticed a weight difference when he picked up the statue, but of course, it's Hollywood. And he probably wouldn't have been able to pick up the statue when you figure out if it was solid, how much heavier the bag of sand needed to be. And it actually ends up being 8 times bigger. So if you imagine this big 8 times bigger amount of sand, it would have been impossible to carry the idol and that much sand. So, and he took out some sand first, right? So yes, totally love that you guys understand that concept. So going into my next slide, this is the next one that we're going to apply that knowledge that density equals mass over volume, and we're going to explain the sinking soda surprise. We're applying this knowledge that we learned to another concept. Okay, so assuming that both of those sodas are full of their contents, why is the Coke at the bottom and the Diet Coke floating? Andrew says sugar is heavy. Yes, but how much heavier? Good point. Regular Coke is denser than water. Aspartame. Yes, I don't know if this was sucralose or aspartame, but yes. If you've ever gone to Denny's or a diner that has those little sugar packets, if you're ever curious, you can always open it up in your water that well, I guess we can't do this in shelter in place, but the sugar, if you put a packet of sugar in your water, it will sink. And if you put like aspartame or sucralose, you'll put it on there and it will float on the surface. So I'm glad you're learning something new, Farida. So that's basically the concept of explore, explain, and apply. And so this can be applied to a bunch of different learning situations, not just science. My next slide is actually allowing for questions and answers. So we'll take a little break and see if there's any questions, Stephanie.
I don't think I'm really seeing any questions so far.
Okay.
Everyone's enjoying answering.
Perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to do another one. This one's for littler, younger students. This is, oh yeah, it does seem like a 3-act task. It could be, because there are 3 different acts, right? There's the explore, explain, and apply. So yes, it could be a 3-act task as well. Anyway, so you are a drop of water. Tell me about your life. What is your life like? Tell me what you do in a day in the life of a drop of water. This is for like 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. I believe it used to be a 4th grade standard, if memory serves me right. But tell me about your life. And you can do that in the chat. I evaporate. It's short. But give me a little detail. Like, what if you had to draw the day of a life of a water drop? I travel downstream. Very good. I make ripples. Life is fluid. I hang out on the side of a glass. Oh, so good. I like to swim. I work with others. Oh, these are great. I fall from the clouds. Yes, and so if we did the word cloud from this, we would see a lot of things about the cloud, the sky, and rain, and rivers, and, you know, collection of water, evaporation. You would see all of these different things, right? So the mini lesson would include a water cycle lesson. And again, short, this one's under 3 minutes.
You may think every drop of rain falling from the sky or each glass of water you drink is brand new, but it has always been here and is a part of the water cycle. At its most basic, the water cycle is how water continuously moves from the ground to the atmosphere and back again. As it moves through this cycle, it changes forms. Water is the only substance that naturally exists in 3 states on Earth: solid, liquid, and gas. Over 96% of total global water is in the ocean, so let's start there. Energy from the sun causes water on the surface to evaporate into water vapor, a gas. This invisible vapor rises into the atmosphere where the air is colder and condenses into clouds. Air currents move these clouds all around the Earth. Water drops form in clouds, and the drops then return to the ocean or land as precipitation. Let's say this time it's snow. The snow will fall to the ground and eventually melts back into a liquid and runs off into a lake or river, which flows back into the ocean, where it starts the process again. That's just one path water can take through the water cycle. Instead of snow melting and running off into a river, it can become a part of a glacier and stay there for a long, long time. Or rain can seep into the ground and become groundwater, where it's taken up by plants. It can then transpirate to gas directly through the leaves and return to the atmosphere. Or instead of being taken up by the plant, the groundwater can work its way up to a lake, river, spring, or even the ocean. As you can see, the water cycle can be a very complicated process, and all its paths through Earth's ecosystems are complex and not completely understood. Water is essential to life on Earth, and fresh water is a limited resource for a growing world population. Changes in the water cycle can impact everyone through the economy, energy production and use, health, recreation, transportation, agriculture, and drinking water. And that's why understanding of the water cycle has become one of NOAA's grand science challenges. NOAA studies all aspects of the water cycle: ocean, weather, precipitation, climate, ecosystems, and our impacts on it.
Okay, so you saw that this explained the water cycle, and now we would apply and we would have the kids show what they know. So I am a big PBL fan. I love making projects out of things. So, and projects not just like, oh, let's draw a picture of the water cycle. That's great. That's a lot of regurgitation though, right? I want a deeper understanding. So I would have my students either visit a local watershed or see if there's an online field trip. You could also make one on Google Maps on the Street View and Google Earth. But then you could also have them answer questions like, how does pollution affect the water cycle? Sorry, PBL, yes, project-based learning. And as Kevin Brookhauser would say, he would say it's people-based learning, right? It involves humanity. So you could actually take your apply and make it a project. And the thing I love about this is that there is no right or wrong answer. It's whether or not they're going to go. I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat too. Whether or not they've been affected by learning about the water cycle and how they can actually bring it into play in their own communities, which is really great. The Google form answers got copied. So when you go to Google Forms, you have the responses, but you can also see that there's a spreadsheet there. So you could just go to the spreadsheet view of the answers and then copy and paste the word cloud. So the word cloud is wordclouds.com, and it's on my presentation, which I will gladly share with anyone. You guys can take it and reborrow and use any part of it. It's totally open. If you notice too, I use Haiku Deck for my slide decks, and so it actually cites all the pictures too, which is a great thing for students who want to borrow copyrighted pictures. They can actually cite them automatically.
Can I ask a few questions?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, great. There's some that have coming up in the chat. So I thought before you move on, first of all, would you use this technique, this kind of a bigger picture question, for small chunks of learning only, or apply it to larger chunks and concepts as well?
I would do for either or. It depends on what you're planning. I wouldn't, so again, Ramsey Masalam uses this every day as a kind of a way of checking in and making sure his students do, because he was doing this during the emergency teaching period. If you go to his blog, and you can see every day he blogged on the journey of at-home emergency teaching. And so he applied it to small concepts, and he applied it to bigger concepts and units of study. For me, I've always done it just for, like the example I showed you with the raindrop. I also worked in conjunction with the teacher, the homeroom teacher who was teaching that concept or that standard. I would do the explore part. She would do the explain, as in the lecture or the mini lesson. And then they would come back to my classroom to do the apply, because I worked in a technology lab at the time. Now I do it in a makerspace. So, you know, when shelter in place isn't in act. Other questions?
Great. Yeah, no, I think that about covers it for now. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So again, you can come up with these ideas very simply just by going through and looking at your standard, and then how do you form a question out of that that's going to engage students in the explore piece. And let me go to my more ideas page. Let me move the chat out of the way. So we did a Rube Goldberg with simple machines in our makerspaces as an at-home lesson. So what we did is, the first day we showed them Audrey's Monster Catch Rube Goldberg, and it's a little boy who is at home, and he builds this very elaborate Rube Goldberg, and he documents how many times he fails and how many times he is successful. And it's really cute because he expects that he's going to fail like 19 times, and he fails 4 times and finally succeeds on the 5th time. And the joy of that in his video is just adorable. So we watched that to kind of explore the idea of Rube Goldberg's and simple machines. And then we showed videos on simple machines, and all of that is on that on these links, which I'll share with you. So the simple machines, you know, levers, pulleys, ramps, I mean, every kind of thing that would appear in a Rube Goldberg, we did a mini video on it and showed it. And then the final thing was they had to do a flip grid of their own at-home Rube Goldberg. And if they didn't have stuff at home to do this with, we allowed them to use Tinkercad and to design one on there to show and talk it through and narrate it through. It was really cute. And we gave them a week to do it. And like I was telling Stephanie before we had the chat, we had office hours online Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the project was due on Friday. The funny thing is, the kids were coming into the work hours, office hours, and instead they were chatting. And so I said, "What? Make it an online recess," because the kids weren't getting a way to communicate with each other. So this was actually a monitored recess with the makerspace specialists. It was brilliant. And they were just letting kids chat and have fun for an hour online. And we did it by grade level. So from TK1, we had, you know, morning chat for an hour. Then and this happened Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And the kids actually looked forward to that more than they did with the project itself. But we had some great projects that came out of it. Stamp Act. we told the kids that this was a 5th grade lesson, and we told the kids that the 4th graders were going to come into their classroom and take all their stuff, and they were going to take over their desks, and that they had Flynn bucks. Their teacher was Miss Flynn, and they had Flynn bucks, and they had to pay their Flynn bucks to the 4th graders, and they were like really upset. And so this was their Explore, and then of course the teacher teaches them about Stamp Act. But in my Explore, I said, "What are you going to do about it?" And some of them said, "We're going to have a sit-in. We're going to have," and they made like posters, and they made online campaigns. It was really funny. And then they learned about the Stamp Act, and they could kind of empathize with the people who were involved in the Stamp Act, and just they gained a deeper and more meaningful understanding of what the Stamp Act meant to people back then. Poverty project, I would have, my Explore was, "You are now 27 years old. You have not graduated from high school. You don't have a high school diploma. You have 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. And you have a spouse who also did not graduate from high school, and you have no family here. How do you survive?" And so they had to go into, this is how I taught them how to do spreadsheets and how to do budgets and a lot of different like life lessons, how to search for directions on a Google map, how to apply for a job. So we did that. They had to go to Craigslist and find a job, and then they had to put it into a Google form, first come, first serve, and how to apply for that job. And then they had to find a place to rent, which made them use Google Maps and see their neighborhood. And they had to live in the Bay Area. So it was real true poverty, trying to make a living in the Bay Area. And then their apply was they had to become senators and write legislation on how to end poverty. And so that's pretty much a month-long unit. And it, like I said, it is powerful. I still have students who are now out of college telling me about the fact that they still remember the Poverty Project and how much of an impact it made on their lives, and how really the only way out of poverty was to get an education. One of the girls who went to an all-girls high school that I taught at was just recently graduated with a bachelor's in pre-law and minor in computer science. And she, to this day, she calls me every Mother's Day to wish me happy Mother's Day. And she was one who was told in 5th grade she was unteachable. A teacher actually told her that. So when we were at Pixar, when she was doing one of her internships in high school, she invited me, and we took a picture of her standing under the signs of the Pixar entry with her name tag, and we sent it to that teacher and said unteachable. It's probably a little mean to do, but it was probably mean to, it was devastating for my student to hear that she was unteachable, because it stuck with her. And she had learning disabilities. We found out she was dyslexic. And so working with her on that and showing that she could do so much more if you gave her, a way to just speak out her answers instead of write them down in a test, and just have her have oral testing, was amazing, just life-changing for her. So that Poverty Project stuck with her for a long time. Insects, there's a lesson plan on there about designing insects. There's also biomes and regions, habitats and adaptations, so that you can see different ways to use the Explore and Explain Apply. And those are all lesson plans, the insects one and the adaptations one. So I'm going to open it up for questions again. And I can't seem to get my chat to work.
Yeah, I think you're good to move on right now. I think people were asking kind of for specific subject recommendations for lessons, but I also was inviting them to attend the after debrief session to kind of brainstorm with colleagues. Oh, here's the question. What platform did you use for online recess? And I
Google
believe
Meet. We actually used Google Meet within the classroom. So we kept it with people only in the unionschooldistrict.org email address. Because we didn't pay for Zoom, we couldn't really control who entered. So we moved everyone to Google Classroom, and they used the Google Classroom Google Meet link there. And so the classrooms were, like I said, grade level specific. And so we had online recess for the whole district grade levels. For the online drawing tools play, they just talked. They all just talked. It was amazing. I was in one of them and they had lots of questions and they were talking about what they were doing, how they missed school, who their teachers were. They were sharing between each other. It was really phenomenal. Yeah, and Google Meets does work well when you are in that. You want to keep it safe for the littler kids. Zoom, you could probably do breakout rooms, but we were just talking about there's no way to like pre-assign people unless you know who's showing up. And because it was elective, we didn't know. But hopefully Google Meet is supposedly coming out with breakout rooms. So hopefully this summer we can play with that and figure it out. Yeah, Google Draw can totally be used. There's also Jamboard. If you ever want to have a great online discussion, Jamboard is free and it's collaborative, just like a Google Doc. Hi, Sabrina. Oh, I miss you. I haven't seen you in forever. So yeah, there's different ways to collaborate online. You could just even have a Google Doc and they can insert drawings in there. Yeah, grid view. How do you do a grid view with breakout rooms? I'm not sure about that. For Google Meet, you can use it up to, I want to say there was up to about 250 people in the room. And then, yes, you install GridView from Chrome, but I don't know how that works for breakouts. They haven't done the breakouts yet, but the tiled view is definitely for GridView. Okay, we are going to keep moving on. So more of the resources that I have. So Explore, Explain, Apply by Matt Miller. He is the one who wrote Ditch That Textbook, Ditch That Homework. He has an Explore, Explain, Apply. He takes a slightly different take on it because he has the HyperDoc girls that tied into it. And so there's a HyperDoc that is Explore, Explain, Apply. Their version of Explore, Explain, Apply is the kids come up with the Explore, which is great. The thing that I warn you against, and if you can control it, that's even better. But the Explorer is them coming up with stuff, but in the research, they show that you have to have guided explorations. Otherwise, they go beyond and forget what the whole goal was. So on the Explore, you may have to make it so that they list 2 or 3 resources and explain how it goes back to the topic. Or if you're creating the Explore for the students, then give them lots of choice that is controlling that. But for the HyperDoc folks, I believe their Explore in this piece is a lot more about the students making the HyperDoc. Screencasting software. So like if you want to do the mini lesson, I believe that you need to do the mini lesson and keep it under 3 minutes. Otherwise kids will either fast forward through it. They may fast forward through it anyway. If you want to try to prevent that, you can do Edpuzzle. If you don't want to pay for Edpuzzle, putting the video into a Google form is great because you can have the Google form have the video as the front part, as the top part, and then have the questions underneath. So it would test for whether or not they watched the video. I find that I don't do that. I just show the video because everything is going to depend on them understanding the concept when we go to the next piece. So I'm hoping that I've engaged them enough in the Explore to have them watch the Apply, because they want to know that answer. They have that fear of missing out. And then, so using QuickTime, I found out that somebody had a really great idea where if you leave a photo booth open, you can have your picture in the corner. Just leave it on. Just don't take a picture of yourself. Just have it on and then record your screen with your slide deck or whatever. You can still have the corner of your face talking, and so you can actually be like this webinar view where I'm presenting and my face is doing all the audio and talking piece. So QuickTime and using photo booth with that. Screencastify is limited free. Right now they're offering free access for teachers, but then they have a limited one that's always free as well. I use Snagit. Camtasia is a little higher version of that, but both are from TechSmith, and they are super amazing because they allow you to record the screen and let you edit it afterwards, which I have to constantly edit mine. I can't, although it's okay when you have Screencastify to show the kids that you do make mistakes and nothing is perfect, and I grade on done and not perfect. So I just am a perfectionist and need to have it without ums and glitches. So WeVideo also, that works on Chromebooks. Oh, you can edit in Screencastify. That's awesome. And so WeVideo also is one that works on Chromebooks, and it also has a screencasting as well as with your face. You can put your face on there. The other piece that I'm adding is Ramsey's blog. It's Cycles of Learning, cyclesoflearning.com. And again, you can click on this and get my presentation. And then Q is the Computer Using Educators. It's free membership, and they have free PD right now with Microsoft called #GETA. And they're doing a lot of things around race because of the current chaotic nature of our police system. And then also they do big conferences that right now are completely virtual, so they are great. Someone mentioned Loom. Loom is great. It is also free right now. And that is, I believe, all I have in my presentation. Is there any?
I have a question
Yes.
here. Yeah, well, I think we have questions, and if people want to keep asking, we can do that too. There was a question, are all Explore, Explain, Apply lessons done through a Zoom call or primarily for younger grades? So kind of two questions in one.
So Explore, Explain, Apply can be done for all grades, and it's not just young. We have the high school teacher doing that Explore, Explain, Apply. That is Ramsey Masalam if you look at his Cycles of Learning. It is synchronous or asynchronous. I prefer to have the Explore part synchronous to have a check-in with my students. I believe it's really important to have some kind of check-in with your students. The Explain is really a under 10 minutes of a lecture. So if it was in person, it would be an under 10-minute lecture. If it's online, it's an asynchronous 3-minute video that explains the concept so they can apply it to the Explore and apply it to new learning. And the Apply is obviously them doing the work and applying it to something else. So it does not have to be done through Zoom. It can be all done in Classroom or some other online learning management system. But again, all grades.
Great. I think this is a really good question, and I bet you have a great answer. Is there a way to get groups of students to present together while in distance learning?
Students participating in groups. Well, if we are doing, if your school allows them to have Zoom or Meet on their own, they can always meet together and do that. And then what we've seen, and interestingly enough, is them recording the Zoom like a webinar, or just recording the screen with Screencastify of their Zoom or their Google Meet and have them present from there. We've done a lot. We've seen like kids doing that for birthday messages to each other. And so they'll have a group of people singing happy birthday to someone, and it's just a recording of the Zoom screen or the Google Meet screen. But you can have them present that way, or you can have them record it in their Screencastify and then each piece, and then have someone blend that together in WeVideo or in iMovie. But there's definitely different ways that you can have group presentations while sheltering in place.
Great. I have another question here about resources. Are all these resources chosen by the school coordinating with all the teachers? Because I think some will be complicated for teachers and students to use a lot of platforms. So I guess kind of, narrowing that down and maybe best practices, something like that.
I like to give students choice. So yes, some of it will be managed by your school. I know if you're with Oak Grove, they really highly regulate what apps you can use because they're really deep into the student data privacy piece, which is so awesome. They get permission from the vendors to not share the student information, and we follow that as well. We try to give students the ability to do like what we add to their Chromebooks, we push out, is wide and varied, and we have like a set base of tools. So like Seesaw, Google Classroom, Screencastify, Loom. We've put them all at the bottom of our at-home learning page so that kids can choose what they want to use. But giving them that choice also gives them a little bit more engagement.
Yes. There's a question here, and I've seen it a few times pop up, about recommendations for working with students with special needs.
That's a really tough one because we were even struggling with that in our district. Like they need so much one-on-one, and rightfully so. I would say for Explore, Explain, Apply, maybe it's a little bit more guided, and meeting with them one-on-one to do the Explore, Explain, and Apply, and then letting them take the Apply further if they're able to. But again, you have, one of the things that's in the research is you have to know your students really well. And if they can do this without, like, you have to know their limitations as well as their abilities to go further. So again, I know we're struggling with it in our district with how to address special needs students, and we have a lot of them doing one-on-one Zoom and Google Meet calls because of it.
Right, thank you. Back to synchronous versus asynchronous. This question popped up. Can you explain how you do Explore that way? I must have missed something. Someone said synchronous versus asynchronous Explore. Please clarify.
Explore. So again, like my Explore was done synchronously, but it can be done asynchronously. I could have just assigned the video of Indiana Jones and put a Google form underneath. It just depends on how you want to do it. I prefer to do the Explore synchronously on a video call or in person. The great thing about Explore, Explain, Apply is that it's flexible in being both asynchronous and synchronous and in person. So it's maybe can you give an example of each of Explore, Explain, and Apply? I'm kind of curious, Anna, on your question. Synchronous is live in person at a certain time. Let's meet at 4. Asynchronous is they're going to complete it on their own timeline within a time frame, but not everybody's online at the same time. That's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous.
Great. I have another question in the Q&A here about how can you tell if a YouTube video or picture is copyrighted, and how can you use copyrighted materials?
So if it's for educational purposes, like that one piece it's actually on someone else's channel, and it says for education purposes, you can use it. It's not, you just basically cannot be making money or profiting off of it, but you always do want to cite your sources. And so if you go to that YouTube channel, you could, if you go to the YouTube that I linked, it's on that channel. So like I said, like you can see at the bottom of my screen, I have the pictures all cited. So you want to make sure you do lead that by example.
Great. I think someone wants to take you back to your classroom days here with this question. How would this look in math if the lesson is on multiplying decimals, for example? How would Explore look? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I would actually probably use money, right? Like money is, you can't break a dollar bill into 4 parts without using decimals, right? So I would definitely be creative and figure out, maybe it's a which one doesn't belong. Maybe it's the Explore piece is just, how do you ask, how many different ways can you break a dollar apart? How many different ways can you break this number apart? And then they're gonna come up with decimals on their own. And then I guess with multiplying decimals, whew, again, you would have to come up with a scenario of, maybe it's a cartoon of somebody giving 25 cents every day for 30 days. And then, you know, how do you do that? Pounds of fish, someone just said in the chat. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways. You just have to be creative for the Explore.
Yeah, definitely. Someone said here, follow up to Explore in math, like middle school level math, just that introduction piece. Yeah, definitely. Using that as introductions. Yep.
Yeah.
Parts of candy bars. Yeah, you just have to
Ooh.
get creative, I think. And
as long as you get to eat the candy bars.
Yes. They show up with their own candy bars. There you go. Let's see if I have another question here. I'm reading through the Q&A, but I think they're also popping up in the chat here. Someone suggested with French. I know someone on here is asking about French. You can show video clip of an interesting scenario and then identify the language, modes, parts of speech, etc. So people are getting creative here.
Great. Yeah, they're gonna be able to do that in the breakout, hopefully, in the discussion piece.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah, homework. Make your parents buy you a Hershey's bar to show up for your math. There you go.
Okay, my address is no.
Yeah. So if you want to ask any more questions, you can pop them in. Otherwise, you know, you might want to.
I finished early. Wow.
Yeah, this is a new thing for us. I think you have lots of things you could explore more. You know, if you want to click on any of these and show us here with the last few minutes, that's up to you, Lisa.
Let me show you Ramsey. Oops. So this is actually from his TED Talk. He was actually in between Bill Gates and Sir Ken Robinson. So he was actually in a real TED Talk, not, you know, TEDx, which is still, TEDx is great. But if you actually look here, you can see, this was yesterday. He did his day, or 2 days ago, his daily online teaching cycle. He talked about all of the different things he did and what exactly worked for him in this emergency learning. Let me spell his name, Ramsey. All panelists. Ramsey Salam. There we go. And he knows I'm a big fangirl. I mean, I get giddy and excited when he's around. Anyway, check in. So he talks about how his check-in is really the Explore. It's reviewing previous knowledge and sparking that curiosity to hopefully get them engaged so that they want to do the lesson and then do the checkout. So again, here's the Explorers part of this as well, but it's the lesson where you're explaining exactly what they're going to need to do. And then checkout is applying the content to new learning. And yes, for the poverty project, definitely we discussed social justice. In fact, this is another way I kicked off a social justice project-based learning idea was when we did at the high school. They had to find a social justice issue that they were passionate about, and then they had to do a TED Talk on it. So they had to do, it was an information literacy class, and so they had to find research, cite it, figure out what stance they took on it, interview people in the community about it, and then talked about how to change it or how to advocate for it. And the poverty project related to the standards I was teaching, I was at the time an 8th grade English language arts teacher, and I worked with the social studies department to talk about government. So we did a lot of writing, especially persuasive writing. We talked about poverty, and they had to pick another topic that affects poverty. So like poverty and hunger, poverty and food supply, poverty and food deserts, poverty and obesity. They all had to pick something that was related and then come up with research on that as well. So there were different ways to for them to apply social justice to this piece, as well as learning standards. Learning standards are really easy to embed if it's good teaching. What is the difference? Video made by student in a TED Talk? A TED Talk is actually done with the TED group. There's TED Ed, which you can look up, and you can get video releases and stuff, and they can learn how to do a TED Talk, and it's basically a TEDx talk. But we didn't do that. We just did a video, but we called it the Diva Dialogue because it was the all-girls school, and that the videos were set up like a TED Talk. And so we did it as a TED Talk style video. So that's the difference. One is managed by TED and the other isn't. And then there was a question about applying the 3 E's for distance learning weekly homework. The homework would be the explain piece. That's kind of like a flipped classroom. If I was in a classroom setting and we weren't in shelter in place, the check-in would happen in the classroom. The explain would happen in the lesson. That would just be take home, and then they would have like a little Google form to fill out about it. And then if you wanted to do homework that way, and then check out would be the in the class application of it, because you want to have the teacher present in anywhere where there is going to be question or creativity or anything beyond the lower order thinking skills. So if you're doing higher order thinking, you definitely want the teacher there so that they can guide it and make sure it's right, because you don't want to keep practicing bad practice, which is why I really don't believe in homework.
There's a question that, did you see that? The transfer? Yeah, go ahead. You
transfer video from online into my slide. So I just did it with links through on Google Slides. You can do that very easily by just embedding a video from YouTube. If it's not on YouTube, then you just do the link and then have it go to the outer link. Like our school district blocks Vimeo because it's not filterable. So if it's a Vimeo video, I try to find the same title on YouTube, and 90% of the time I can find it, and that 10% I can't, I will show it in my online class with me playing the video and having it be seen on the online piece or in class with my computer doing it.
Great idea.
I'm looking. Okay, but anyway, the thing I love about cycles of learning is it's constantly hearing from Ramsey about his different projects that students do. These are all student projects that were done in his engineering class or in his chemistry classes. And the different tools he uses. He uses Padlet, but again, if you don't pay for Padlet, you can use Jamboard. Trying to shortcut to is Command K to add a link. Great. I didn't know it was Command K to add a link. Thanks, Karen. Repeat comment on weekend homework. I don't believe in weekend homework. I don't know what other repeating that would need. But again, looking at Ramsey's information, he goes back to when he was teaching at Sacred Heart in San Francisco, and his process of learning how explore, explain, apply can work, and how his thing was, well, kids are getting really bored of having this flipped classroom type model. How can he re-engage them and get them to do the work, you know, and still be engaged? And so he talks about that whole process. And again, he's one of the people that wrote his doctorate thesis on basically on the cycles of learning and revamping it from those two other folks that had done original research on it. One of which is still actually an active teacher at UCSB. So super, super cool. Yes, we could talk, Maya, on any homework really, but definitely summer and weekends. I don't believe that anyone has the right to tell my kids what they can do at home, except for me. So I really don't like school infringing on my homework, on my home time with homework and projects during vacation time. It means vacation, right? Like, yes, get that message.
I think I have one last question here,
Sure.
And we can kind of wrap it up. And I'm sure you can answer this pretty easily. Does Jamboard have a limit on the number of frames? And someone said maybe 20.
Ooh, I don't know. I've never pushed it. Sabrina says 20, and I would trust that Sabrina would know. Yeah, a lot of people are saying 20. So you might want to put them in groups and then do 2 separate. I don't know what class kick is, but
I think maybe some things left for us to explore.
yes.
I wanted to
Ooh.
go ahead and probably start wrapping this up because it is 10:30 now. And, you know, I liked how this kind of ended on a Q&A. That was interesting to me that we got to answer some things in real time. So I just wanted to thank everybody for attending, and Lisa, to thank you for your knowledge. Lots of great things to discuss and think about and to explore more for us as well.
Thank you.
I wanted to invite anybody else who wants to attend our debrief session. Maybe you want to talk some more with some colleagues and think about how you can use these ideas when thinking about your own classroom. And just to remind you all, this was all recorded. The slides will be sent out to you as well. You'll have access to this afterwards. And if you are joining us in the debrief session, it just takes us a few minutes to get there and get it started sometimes as we transition from this Zoom to the next one. So anyhow, thank you again, Lisa.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. And I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Take care.